Ladies and gentlemen, this is Killer Kross. Please do not notify the police. Your signal has been interrupted. You are now listening to Rock and Wrestling Local 420. Tuck your chin, please, sir. Thank you.
Wow, what a fantastic gift. I realize the title of your show, Rock and Wrestling Local 420. And I'm going to take that idea and go extreme.
Alrighty then, this is Bill Nershi of the String Cheese Incident coming to you from up in the Windy Mount. I'm here joining Cosmic Chris on the Rock and Wrestling Local 420.
This is the Big Ugly JD Bishop, and if you're not listening to Rock and Wrestling Local 420, you must be stupid!
Hey there, radio buddies, it's me, Max Volume. You are listening to Rock and Wrestling and Local 420 with Cosmic Chris.
Hey, this is Chad of the Two Man Power Trip of Wrestling Podcast. When you're done listening to my show, head on over and listen to the Rock and Wrestling Local 420, and I guarantee you will not be disappointed.
Hey, folks, I got a name for you when you're the greatest podcast in podcast alive today. They don't call you a great podcast. They call you Rock and Wrestling in Local 420. Beat it if you can.
Wow, that's a pretty good hit. So, welcome back, boys and girls, to this week's show. We got a new show. Hope you enjoyed the 420 episode and the Bicycle Day episode. But, yeah, I got a few things I want to talk about. I'm going to be, doing some experimentation over the next few weeks. I did just add episode 131 to YouTube as far as the talking parts. I gotta still figure out formats to do anything before that. And I'm actually probably going to be changing my intro as far as the Iron Maiden parts, because I don't want to get flagged, because it already got flagged just because I had Iron Maiden in the thing. And so, like I said, I'm not going to put up the music parts and stuff. And, see, it's funny because the first episode, I put in the first episode a couple years ago. And it was flagged, and it went one by one every fucking song, right? You know? Well, this episode only did the one song. It was the fact that I used Iron Maiden. And so, you're going to see some changes over the next few weeks. However, if I figure them out or somebody else figures them out. But we're evolving the show, definitely. And I've got a few interviews I still got to nail down and just find. And it's not just that not just that I'm just stalling on doing them. It's finding the time during all this bullshit that we're dealing with, because I still got to hold a regular job. I'm not somebody that can just afford to do a podcast and throw money at it and be popular. I have to hope that I gain an audience and you guys like it. You know, it's like Eddie Trunk can do a podcast and he has a built-in audience. Vince Russo or anybody like that has a built-in audience. Adam Carolla, built-in audience because of who they are. And so, and a lot of these people are right. There are fucking millions of us like me that, you know, are just want to do this, because I didn't start in 2010, 2005 when podcasting really got, you know, started by Adam Curry, no less, the MTV VJ. He is really the father of podcasting. That's who I want to get on my show at some point. That would be fucking cool. But I digress. My point is going through changes. So bear with me. Hopefully you like it. And like I always say, throw some ideas my way. email me, do something. I want to try and engage a lot more. I'm engaging with Instagram, I'm engaging with YouTube, but they're different audiences, and I'm trying to link them all together and learn how to do all this stuff. And I'm a slow learner. That's the thing. I've always admitted it. I don't have a great education, and I can only try and get better. So, one of the things I'm going to talk about is wrestling, but only a few things that I really liked of what I saw, because I want to get into wrestling for a few minutes before I get into any music, because that's my livelihood, is the music. And I'm still not actually seeing anything that, you know, I'm really liking. I'm not writing down shows every other day. I am watching the shit, but, and at first I really did like the empty arenas, and I know some people don't like the empty arenas, but it was a chance for WrestleMania to become an actual show, and some of these to become shows, and I dig that, but it's also getting fucking monotonous. And unless they do something, they're going to completely lose the audience. And I'm sticking with it, hoping that something will happen. One of the big things was last week, like 20 fucking people were just released from the WWE. And these are like, even some of them are, you know, Shane Helms, Kurt Angle, who's one of the biggest one? Rusev. Even though Lana's still working, Rusev is not. And the thing is, I think this is now a chance, because nobody likes seeing anybody lose their jobs, especially in all this bullshit. But if Tony Khan wants to keep AEW alive with all this stuff, then, you know, I mean, he can hire some of these people and put together some quality television, because as of right now, it's just totally fucking bland. Now, with that said, like I said before, he has a chance to actually do something, and I think the same thing with Impact. But the problem is, see, that's the thing, Impact tapes all their shows like 4 to 8 shows ahead, like a month or two ahead of time, which is smart when you're dealing with that. But at the same time, there's going to be a time, if we still can't go to concerts and have mass gatherings, they're going to have to do some serious changes. I don't know. I want to see wrestling change for the better, and I want to see concerts again. It's getting really fucking depressing, you know? I mean, it's just, like I said, I wrote down a few things, but, you know, there's, let's see, one of the things I wrote down was, they said, I think, I forget who they were talking about, but I think it was, somebody said Trey is silky smooth in the ring, which I thought was kind of funny. And then there was an Impact contract signing with Sami Callihan and Ken Shamrock. And that turned into the whole thing. Like, Ken Shamrock is, like, they did this angle where Sami Callihan did the fireball proof. And what's funny is, I used to watch Eric Wright do that in WCWC 4 or 5 years ago. Like, when Eric Wright up in Portland Wrestling turned heel, he was with Richard Sincere, who has agreed to do this show sooner or later, but me locking down an interview, I want to get Richard Sincere. But when Richard Sincere and Eric Wright were kind of turning heel, Eric Wright did this fireball thing, and there was this one where, oh God, who was it? I don't know. I don't think it was Matt Stryker. I want to say Gangrel or something. But they did this gimmick. And so that's what the Sami Callihan thing reminded me of. And so Sami Callihan does this fireball poof, which apparently renders Ken Shamrock blind, and he couldn't see for a while. So now Ken Shamrock's pretty fucking pissed for the last few weeks. And so they're at this contract signing, and it kind of just goes back and forth with Sami taunting him because now he has agreed to not touch Sami Callihan. And so with that means that if Ken Shamrock touches Sami Callihan, he doesn't get his match at whatever the pay-per-view is. So outside of that, you know, like I said, I don't remember shit from AEW. I thought AEW actually completely sucked this last week. The only thing I noticed is that Tony Schiavone, which the thing that was cool is throughout the whole show, it was commentated by Tony Schiavone and Chris Jericho. So I thought that was pretty cool. And they talked about old WCW stuff, so. But I can't think of anything, even on Raw, that really. You know what? I have enjoyed. The one thing I have totally enjoyed still, and hands down, every week is the Otis and Dolph Ziggler and Mandy and Sonya Deville kind of thing. That is hot, and I'm loving it, and I hope that keeps going because I want to see where this can go. So let's get into some headlines too. If we've had a few people die, one of them is Hank Steinbrenner, who is one of the Yankees. His brother is the other Steinbrenner, the one that Larry David played on Seinfeld, and he dies at 63. Brian Dennehy, one of the most awesome actors in the world. One of my favorite movies he was in was First Blood, the first Rambo movie, and he died. He was 81 years old, and it's funny because people are actually saying these people died, but it wasn't from the coronavirus. Because we're hearing all these people died of the coronavirus. Speaking of which, right after I recorded last week's episode, John Prine died. So, rest in peace, John Prine. You were a hell of a songwriter, man. But also, one of the most famous LSD chemists. Now, when I say famous, I mean he was actually in the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, which was this group of chemists that talked about, back in the day, staying underground like Abby Hoffman style, and, you know, making sure that LSD was still put out there. You know, William Leonard Pickard, you know, like all these old school people that, you know, promised to, you know, live this lifestyle because they felt that it was, you know, religious enough, spiritual enough to them that they couldn't leave this in the hands of the government. And he died, and I think he was 62, I think. And, you know, so, like I'm saying, you know, also Jimmy Webb, he's a famous shop owner in, I think, the Village or Brooklyn or something. I think the Village. But he fashionized Debbie Harry, Rob Halford, and Iron Maiden, and gave heavy metal and punk a fashion, gave them their look. And he died. He definitely was 62. I'm pretty sure, yeah, he was 62, yeah. And he was on that metal show in like the first or second season, the one where Don and Jim go to him and get made over to look like heavy metal gods and shit. It was a good episode. It was back when they were still like a half an hour long in the early years of that metal show. But yeah, we're hearing about all these people dying. Some of coronavirus, some not of coronavirus. But we're also fearing people that are actually getting better. And one of those people is Will Carroll, the drummer for Death Angel. I just watched this video that was on Blabbermouth where he just talked. He was on death's door. The doctors told him that, you know, he was not, they didn't expect him to come out of his coma. But now he's walking around, he's home, and hopefully getting better. And he says thanks to all the fans and all that. But that was after a tour that we've talked about that he did with Testament and Exodus, because they were in Europe for a month. And they came back, and he was suffering the worst of it. Chuck Billy, in his interview with Eddie Trunk, talked about Will Carroll like he's in bad shape. He's on a ventilator right now, you know. So seeing people get better is a cool thing as far as I'm concerned. Because I just want, you know, I've kind of already come to the conclusion I'm probably not going to go to the Gorge this summer for fish, especially since Washington's like the hotbed apparently. And it's weird because it's rampant in New York, rampant in LA, rampant in Seattle. But here it's not, and one of the things I've been seeing is that there's people that just want to get back to normal, and then people that are like, those people are stupid, they're spending the coronavirus. And it's weird because I hear both sides of the story, and I am just scared, I'm depressed, I'm like, it's freaking me out. But at the same time, I still want to live in a positive sense, because because the governor or something, the mayor of LA for sure has said no concert sporting events until 2021, period. And the governor of California said something. So obviously Tahoe fish is going to get well, I don't know, because that's on the Nevada side. So, but nonetheless, the Gorge, I don't know. I just don't see, you know, I definitely don't see, if there's no concerts in California, that means the Chase Center shows, and there was an LA show on Fish Tour is probably not going to happen. So I'm already saying, even though they haven't announced that they're not doing it, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get to see Fish this summer. And what's weird about this whole thing is, at the very beginning of the year, what did I say? This is going to be the summer of reunions. Rage Against the Machine, Roger Waters, like all these people are going out on tour. Black Crowes are back together. Everyone's canceling, postponing. And it's just like, wow. I want to be able to go sit in my friend's bar again and hang out. Even if I have to wear a mask and open the mask to take my drinks, I don't care, dude. I'm just like so crazed. And speaking of people getting better, like Will Carroll, Quiet Riot's Frankie Banali, a year ago on April 17th, said that he got told you're gonna die in 6 months. It is now a year later, and he's still healthy. Like, he still may die. You don't know. But let's hope that he keeps going, because, yeah, I mean, he's just an all-around cool fucking guy, man. Frankie Banali's, to me, one of the coolest rock and roll guys ever. And there's a few other things I wanted to talk about. Bob Dylan launches gentle acoustic ballad, I Contain Multitudes. We just know that he just released that 17-minute song a couple weeks ago, which I think I'm going to download and play one of these days. I think that would be cool. So let's see. He's still putting out music, even though he said something about selling his soul to the devil, so I don't know. At the Crossroads. Sammy Hagar and The Circle play Van Halen's Good Enough during lockdown. That's kind of cool. A lot of these bands are really putting out new music, and that's another thing I like. They're bringing back people wanting to hear new music. I mean, bands like Greta Van Fleet and the Struts and all those bands that are keeping rock and roll going, a lot of the old schoolers, you know, because it used to be when you go to a concert, hey, here's some off our new album. They're like, okay, I got to go to the bathroom. But now people are like, no, they want to hear new music, because we've had last 20 years of 80s and 90s nostalgia, which is nice for somebody in my generation, but at the same time, still, Rick Wakeman releases the Red Planet video trailer. Tony Iommi raises more than 19,000 pounds for NHS charity. Roger Waters on a Pink Floyd reunion. It would be fucking awful. And I don't know, because I hate this I want to see Pink Floyd together. And he says, I reached out to those guys and said, hey, because they were going to redo that box set of Animals. And he was like, no, I'm not going to, I'm not saying, but hey, we should, allow some of this stuff out there. And he said that they were like, yeah, no, fuck you. Which I don't know, because it's always been known that Nick Mason wanted to do, because he's the one that said a few months ago, I've given up on it. And it's so weird because Nick Mason said he wanted to. Now Roger Waters is saying it was Nick Mason and David Gilmour that didn't want to do it. So it's just a bunch of more stupid shit, which I fucking hate, because I want to see the three members of Pink Floyd. That out of any band other than maybe the Talking Heads have a reunion tour, that's the one band I want to see. I think Pink Floyd probably would be the biggest reunion in outright history. I don't think any other band reunited, because the Police did it, there's bands that have done it. Pink Floyd would probably be the biggest one, I think. So that's it for the intro. Let's get into some music, and then I'll come back for This Week in Rock and Wrestling. So I'm going to get into this next set of music and start it off with the Four Tops, and I Can't Help Myself. I love you and nobody else. Sugar pie, honey bunch. You know that I love you.
Hey, this is Kevin Kleinrock from Masked Republic and the Keeping It 100 with Conan podcast, and you're listening to Rock and Wrestling Local 420. Make sure you tune in every week.
Hey, it's Pat Kelly of the West Coast Wrestling Connection and the Golf Guys radio show, and you're listening to my buddy, Cosmic Chris, Rock and Wrestling Local 420.
This is Hotshot Danny Duggan, and you're listening to Rock and Wrestling Local 420.
Well, hey guys, we are back. Well, I started off that first set with the Four Tops and I Can't Help Myself, Sugar Pie, Honey Bunch. Took that into Michael Damian with his song Rock On, which is taken from the movie Dream a Little Dream. Took that into the Damn Yankees, which is Ted Nugent, Jack Blades, and Tommy Shaw, super group, with Coming of Age. And then this set ended with Night Ranger and Sister Christian. So that was the first rockin' set. I hope you enjoyed it, because I kind of had this theme with the Coming of Age thing and Sister Christian, which is leading us into This Week in Rock and Wrestling. April 22nd, 1978, Ezekiel Jackson is born. 1876, Tchaikovsky completes Swan Lake. 1926, Charlotte Ray, Mrs. Garrett from The Facts of Life and Different Strokes is born. 1922, Charles Mingus is born. 1936, Glenn Campbell is born. 1950, Peter Frampton is born. 2013, Richie Havens dies. He was actually the first person to go on at Woodstock. He wasn't scheduled till later on, but I guess the opening band hadn't showed up yet, and they kind of pushed him on stage, which is funny because, I'm recording this on April 19th into April 20th, and, it's a bicycle day, of course, heading into National Pot Day. And he was apparently really high on acid because he didn't figure, I'm not playing for another 6 hours or so. So apparently he ate some acid, and when they pushed him on stage, he was peaking like a motherfucker, as was Carlos Santana, the Dead, the Airplane, fucking, everybody and their brother, Hendrix, The Who. So, April 23rd, 1944, Tony Atlas is born. 1961, Terry Gordy is born. 1977, John Cena is born. 1991, Dr. Britt Baker is born. 1984, Moose is born. 1965, I Can't Help Myself by the Four Tops is released. 1936, Roy Orbison is born. 1960, Steve Clark of Def Leppard is born. Also, let's see, 1996, Josh and Jake Kiszka from Greta Van Fleet is born. So they're 24 years old. Let's see, April 24th, 1954, Jack Blades is born. 1963, Billy Gould from Faith No More is born. He was the bass player. 1982, Kelly Clarkson is born. 1992, David Bowie weds Iman. 2007, Whitney divorces Bobby. April 25th, 1945, Stu Cook from CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival, the bass player, is born. 1995, Ginger Rogers dies at 83 years old. 2009, B. Arthur dies from Maude and the Golden Girls. Very funny comedic actress. You know, one of my favorite scenes is, that Mel Brooks movie, History of the World Part 1, where she's the unemployment lady. That's fucking hilarious. Let's see, April 26, 1949, Crusher Jerry Blackwell is born. 1967, Kane Glenn Jacobs is born. 1970, The Yeti is born. 1982, Rod Stewart apparently gets mugged in New York and his $50,000 Porsche is stolen. 1959, John Corabi from Motley Crue is born and Dead Daisies. 1960, Roger Taylor, the drummer for Duran Duran. No, not the drummer for Queen. Duran Duran is born. 1962, Michael Damian from The Young and the Restless. He also had that hit Rock On from the Dream a Little Dream movie. He was born. 1970, T-Boz from TLC is born. 1970, Shane Evans from Collective Soul is born. 1975, Joey Jordison, the drummer for Slipknot, is born. 1984, Count Basie dies at the age of 79. 1913, George Jones is born. 2018, Charles Neville, the sax player for the Neville Brothers, dies at the age of 79. April 27th, 1810, Beethoven composes Für Elise. 1972, New York City Mayor John Lindsay appeals that Lennon not be deported. 1981, Wings disbands Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney's band. 1944, Cuba Gooding Sr. is born. 1951, Paul Ace Frehley is born. 1959, Sheena Easton is born. And April 28th, 1981, Alex Riley is born. Also Drew Gallagher on that day. 1952, Chuck Leavell from the Allman Brothers is born. 1953, Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth is born. 1960, Oakland rapper Too Short is born. You know, one thing I forgot to mention in the intro, and I want to get into it, is we also lost Howard Finkel, which is the announce voice of the WWF for 30 fucking years. Dude, you know, he's the guy that was like, introducing Andre the Giant, and over in this corner, Hulk Hogan. You know, because Gene Okerlund, Mean Gene, he was the guy backstage. He did in-ring stuff, but he was interviewing, people. This was the guy that was announcing, kind of like, Michael Buffer did in WCW and boxing and stuff. And another thing I wanted to get into was, it's just a little tidbit, but Jim Ross was commentating some of this stuff in AEW, and he was like, why do we need security barriers if nobody's here? And making weird comments about empty arena, why the need for steel chairs. It's an empty arena. Why do we need steel chairs? And I just found that a little interesting, because it was just like they're actually talking about the empty arena stuff, but what was the purpose of some of those comments? I mean, I don't know if he's just trying to bring light to it or just talk about I don't know. It was just kind of weird. It was one of the things I liked too, because that gave it a dose of reality as well. So that was This Week in Rock and Wrestling. You know what? I'm going to start this next set off with Too Short, seeing as how we just ended This Week in Rock and Wrestling with Too Short. So I want to play Too Short after we hear a word from our sponsor. So, hey, we'll see you at the end of the show.
Are you hungry? FoodJets.com offers on-demand food delivery with fast curbside service 7 days a week. If you're hungry, it's time to buzz the tower. Come on board. Just download FoodJets on your App Store, Google Play, or go to FoodJets.com and put in promo code RADIO to get $5 off your first order.
So this is Greg Golden from the Greg Golden Band, Bizarre Guitar in Reno, Nevada, and you're listening to Rock and Wrestling Local 420. Those guys rock.
Hey, guess what? We're at the end of this episode again, as we are every week at the end of the episode. So, I started that second set of music off after This Week in Rock and Wrestling with a tribute to Too Short off his album Life Is Too Short, Don't Fight the Feeling. One of the first dirty rap songs I ever heard. The first dirty rap song I ever heard, technically, was Two Live Crew, Hey, We Want Some Pussy. But this was one of the first two at the same time, roughly. And, man, I was way into Too Short when I was a kid. Next up, we got Slipknot with Wait and Bleed, Motley Crue with Hooligan's Holiday, our weekly George Carlin rant with Keeping People on Their Toes. Next up, we had Ace Frehley off his Spaceman album, Rockin' with the Boys. Greta Van Fleet with Black Smoke Rising. And then I decided to close the show. And now granted, this week ends with the 28th, and the next one starts with the 29th. This show was from 4/29/87. I just wanted to end it with the Neville Brothers and with their song Fire on the Bayou, and it was from April 29th, 1987, which technically this episode ends on the 28th and the next episode begins on the 29th, but I wanted to end it with the Neville Brothers and bring just one of their most badass songs, in my opinion. There's a lot of Neville Brothers songs. I could have played Hey Pockway and all that, but I've always liked Fire on the Bayou. And, that's our episode. And, like I said, we're going to be going through some changes, and I don't know what's to come. Like I said, it's really weird right now how I'm dealing with stuff and trying to personally figure out what I want to do as far as, my weekly blogs. Basically, my podcast, my show, how I want to present it, how I want to hopefully gain more followers on my YouTube channel, on my Instagram, Punching Baby Yoda, on the Twitter at RAWL420POD, at RAW420Pod, So all these social media outlets I'm trying to grow, but in different ways. I want them all to be connected, but I want them all to grow individually. So I do different stuff on Instagram than I do on YouTube. And I want to be able to monetize some of my YouTube, but not go against whatever guidelines they have. So I don't know. It's just kind of, I like to think I'm gaining momentum with how things are going, talking to the right people, talking about the right things, at least what my audience actually wants me to talk about, which is rock music, wrestling, and pot. That's what they expect from me, and that's what I'm going to give them, because that's what I like talking about. I could talk about a bunch of stuff. I could talk about politics. I could talk about like all this stupid conspiracy shit that I've just I don't know anymore. I don't care anymore. I just want this all to fucking end. I want our lives to go back to normal, or if this is some fucking sham, have the Great Awakening happen, because all I want is to live my life and have my kids grow up in a fucking world where people aren't going to get chipped and we're all Soylent Green, for Christ's sakes, or any of those post-apocalyptic movies, Terminator and Mad Max, etc., etc. So I'm going to end that on that note. If you want to email us, Rock and Wrestling Local 420 at gmail.com. Catch us on anywhere you catch podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., etc. And be sure to check out We Just Made the List with Cassie and Zach. Check out Z-Dude, Zeedood. He's the one helping me with my YouTube channel. And one of my biggest helps ever, and a really good friend of mine, throw him some love, Brian Zane from Wrestling with Regret. Check out his show on YouTube. And last but not least, John and Chad from the Two-Man Power Trip of Wrestling. Be sure to check out their other podcast, the Triple Threat Podcast with the franchise Shane Douglas, on the Realm Network, Vince Russo's brand. And hey, we'll see you next week for episode 133. Ciao.